Thank you. Good afternoon. It is 1:38, and we'll call the meeting to order. Do you have a copy of the land acknowledgement? Thank you very much. As we gather, we would like to acknowledge on behalf of the Renfrew and Area OPP Detachment Board and our community that we are meeting on the traditional territory of the Algonquin people. We would like to thank the Algonquin people and express our respect and support for their rich history, and we are extremely grateful for their many and continued displays of friendship. We also thank all of the generations of people who have taken care of this land for thousands of years. And do you want to do a roll call, or if you could carry the roll call for us, please?
Chair Robert Tripp.
Present.
Scott Brum.
Present.
Glenn Campbell. Angela Fields.
Present.
Jason Legree.
Present.
Lisa McGee.
Here.
Stephen Parker.
Present.
John Proctor.
Present.
Councillor Tabbert. Present. Chair Tripp, we do have quorum.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Any disclosures of pecuniary interest or general nature thereof? Seeing none, thank you. And approval of the minutes. That the Renfrew and Area OPP Detachment Board meeting minutes of August 21st, 2024 and September 4th, 2024 be approved as distributed. Scott and Lisa, thank you. We have no delegations or presentations, which brings us into the items of business, the 24 and 25 budget and municipal billing, which was tabled at the meeting, and open the floor for discussions. Can I suggest we perhaps start with the 25 budget, because it is the one that is, I think, topical for us and timely with the presentations to our respective municipalities. The 24 budget is really a place marker in the event that in December, the ministry provides implementation funding for police boards. We need to have a benchmark to show against. So that, I think, is important, but I think the 25 budget is where the time should be spent this morning. As background, the budget was discussed amongst the 7 municipalities a few weeks ago, and then we didn't have quorum, unfortunately, at the last meeting, so we're carrying those discussions forward. There was discussion, and we made some slight revisions to it, but the honorariums and the chair honorarium remained relatively the same. Chair mileage conferences remained relatively the same. The big issue was on the came down to the contract administrator. Let me get to the right page here. Into the administrator at the $30 an hour for 20 hours a week. So I'm wondering if it's easier, in order to move this from a draft budget to a full budget, if we go back through it line by line like we did in our first exercise, and then we can have approval by category, if that makes sense to the floor. So with that, honorariums for the 11 members. If you recall, it was set at a higher amount. We went back down to 150 per meeting per member across the board for the 11 members, and we based it on an average of 8 meetings in the month. That allowed for us to meet as a board every second month and have 2 extra should there be special committees or special meetings. But that our plan would be to have 6 meetings in the next calendar year, 25 year. So that came out at $1,320. The chair honorarium at $400. The chair would not receive the $150, so it's not $150 plus 4. Please.
If that's the case, then it would be 10 members.
Beg pardon?
If that's the case, then it would be 10 members, not 11 members.
Correct, thank you. 7 plus 4 is 11. So we have, sorry, there's two members that are,
8, right, so that would be 10.
but in January, we will probably have the two provincial appointees, which will bring us,
Okay,
I
numbers
missing
are
the math?
hard.
7 municipalities, the 2 appointed.
7,
sitting here, and
9.
We have 2 more that's not yet.
Never mind.
may I suggest that one member be rolled back to 1:30 a meeting? So 150 a meeting for the 11 members. The chair would be separate from that and billed at 400 per month, which would accommodate the work that's required in between the monthly meetings and correspondence and stuff. Employer's cost was discussed. We've left it in, but if it's an honorarium, my understanding, but not confirmed, is that we would not need that honorarium. Or sorry, the mandatory. But it would be up to us on our T4As to pay the tax. The 150 would be taxable, but we wouldn't put it through. It's not an employment cost like CPP, UIC, and CPP. So I've left the employer in case we need it. If not, we can, as we talked about revising this halfway through, we can either reallocate, readjust, or move it into a surplus for the end of the year. So are we okay with the 20,520 for that category? Someone to move, someone to second, all in agreement?
Sorry, you moved and seconded?
I beg your pardon?
You moved and seconded?
Lisa, I thought, moved it, and Connie seconded.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
All in favor? Perfect, thank you. Mileage, we had talked about at the 40 for the 8 meetings for the 11 people, and the chair weekly at 40. Not everyone claims mileage, but for those who are traveling from a distance, it makes sense to claim it, and it's standard policy. You could not claim it from your municipality and from here. I think most of us in the municipalities have guidelines that we can't double dip, so it's either claiming it from the board or claiming it from the municipality, but not from both. The chair, I think, could come down because that was originally billed at requiring a weekly trip into Renfrew. That's 4 trips a month. That may change in '25 because there may not be the need to come in. Right now, that's been administering old grants and signing, which may not necessarily carry through. Again, it's a small item. We may want to leave it in, or I would even suggest cutting that in half. And then if we need it, we can move it from somewhere else if we have surplus in the year, but open to the floor to what makes sense. Leave it or cut it? Connie?
Can we just leave it and review it later? Because you said we'd be reviewing others too,
Okay.
so that was my suggestion.
So, okay, we're good with that. Conferences,
So we had to move around seconded?
we'll do the whole thing at the end, if we just, in this block under travel. So conferences, we discussed the Zone 2 meeting. 3 people. Zone 2 is relatively inexpensive. They're local. The last one was in Pembroke. The November one is in Ottawa. So it's a little bit of mileage and as needed a hotel if it's a long way, but Ottawa is usually just drive down, do the meeting and drive home. It's an important thing to have in our budget because it's part of the training and it links us into the other associations. What other boards are doing is they're setting in their policies and guidelines that the chair and 2 members of the board attend, but that it rotates through, so everybody on the board has an opportunity to go to one of the meetings as a minimum during the year. There's 4 meetings a year, if they so desire. It's not mandatory, but we don't want to have it locked into the same folk. I think it's important for all of us to have exposure. Lisa?
Just an administrative, so it says Zone 2, open bracket, SPPL. I'm assuming that's supposed to be a number of
That should
people.
be
This should be a
people.
3
We take the S off and put the bracket.
and put 3, okay.
And then the OSP OAPSB AGM was 4 members, and it averages 2,500. I'm not sure where this one is going to be this year. Last year it was in Blue Mountain. It might be in Ottawa this year. I'm not sure. And usually we have the administrator, the chair, and 2 directors, and an OPP representative is appreciated and valuable, but they would fund their own. It wouldn't come out of the budget. The OPP stand independent. So that comes into 10,000 for a total of 19,040. So discussions, comments, and happy for comments. We've gone through it once, but it's certainly open if people have changed their position, changed their mind, or think of. So it is? Okay. Carolyn?
Don't very close your mic. Just because it won't.
Yeah, no, June 3rd to the 5th, 2025, Blue Mountain Resorts.
Okay. Carolyn?
Just for clarification, I know we just adjusted the top line for the estimated meetings for 10 members because the chair was separated out. Is that the intent for the mileage estimate at $40 at 8 meetings for 11 people as well, and keep the chair separate, or is that an additional responsibility? I just want clarification.
No, we keep it separate.
Okay.
So 3520 and then 1920. So for a total of 1940 under this budget paragraph, can we have a mover and a seconder? Scott and Jason, all in favor? Opposed? Oh, of course. Thank you. We just had that conversation that I listened attentively to.
Dairy farmers, right?
Yeah. You got all that? Yeah? Okay, thanks. Governance and operational, insurance 5,000. We'll leave it at the 5,000. Our insurance has been paid for this year, which will carry us through until this time next year, and it was 3880 plus tax. So we're in that ballpark. We'll leave this at $5,000 for next year because it may be a slight increase or possibly a decrease after our first year. Reporting we had left at 2,500, and that is for our reports that we need to do back into the municipality. We have one that's due in June, which is like not a glossy annual report, but one that I think we want to spend a bit of money on to have it come out like a professional document that reflects the OPP and the board's engagement over the last year. The strat plan development, we're also mandate, and that's a mandate by the legislation to report. The other mandate is to develop a strat plan in line with the OPP strat plan. So there's 3,500 to help walk us through the planning process, the SWOT analysis, all that goes with that. It's a low amount to traditional strat plans, but I think in our first year it will be, there's enough tools available, and we're working off a template that's already there from the OPP. Website design and hosting. Again, once we're up and running, and now that we have insurance and we're starting to get things online, we can start to look at the website for a January launch. But that will continue the website through the year and the hosting to keep it running. Professional fees we had at 5,000. That is there for accounting and finance and legal as needed. We will start to develop policies, and there's some we may want to have a set of legal eyes on just for our own protection on the major governance pieces. And then our membership to the association is 3. Discussions, input, thoughts, Scott?
I just think for this year, the website design and hosting is very low. To have anybody design a website and host it for 1 year for $35,500, I don't think it's possible.
Okay.
I know we've just done, we just flipped over and redid our website, and it was a lot more than add an extra zero. That's what it was to get the new website up and running. So I don't know what you envision in that website design and hosting, but that's really low.
Okay. Angela?
I actually thought it was reasonable. I just worked with two boards in the past year who put out tenders for exactly what this says, website design and website hosting, and both came in around $3,000 to $4,000. Both boards in the quotes. It just depends on what you want
Correct.
and how interactive. Municipalities have a lot of arms, they have a lot of extras, that kind of thing, whereas boards tend to be a little quieter and a little simpler.
Correct.
So I actually do feel that this is a decent estimate.
Good, thank you. Other comments, thoughts? When we did budget it, we looked at other boards, because you are right, municipalities are a very cumbersome, not cumbersome, they're a very heavy and intricate design build with many moving parts. This is really our face to the community. It's a place for us to post independently the minutes, the agenda, notice out to the community. The OPP reporting that comes into us will go onto the website, and it's a chance. And then the website is a link to the 7 municipalities and vice versa, them back to us. So it's really the face, it's not a substantive active, and it would not have an awful lot of, it wouldn't be an active site with people going to it daily to update. It's an email, so that we would have info at, Renfrew Area Police Services Board, we'll find something smaller for that .com, so the public has a chance to write in and ask questions or ask for contacts. So if we're still comfortable with that, Scott, does that make sense?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
No, I was just,
Nope, just checking back.
We're, there's several different levels.
Yeah. We may grow in the coming years,
Exactly, so I
yeah.
just wanted to make sure that, that's what we were after, and yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you. Mover and a seconder, Connie to move and John to second. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. To program. IT and phone. IT was a computer for the administrator. We feel it should be, everything should be on one singular computer that belongs to the board, and not to a municipality if we partner with a municipality, or to an individual we hire and using their personal equipment. It should be, and that's a one-time small expense. Computer is, again, we're not going to buy something that's complicated for gaming, just a very basic computer that our data can be stored on. And then IT, in our municipality, we have an option where the councillors agree to use their own phone and they're compensated $30 a month. So we have two options. One is to get a phone with our own number, and that person have it, or we have somebody using their own phone that we offset. Either way, that would be within, either of those options would be within that budget. Supplies is kind of self-explanatory, papers, ink, printing. That may be low because we've had the pleasure of Carolyn and her magic, all of this paper, the photographs, photocopying, all of the material that's being sent out has been under the generous actions of her, the town of Renfrew. We will end up having to buy our own paper and pens and staples unless we procure them elsewhere. Then we come to the administrator, and that's, I think, where the bulk of the conversation is. There was significant pushback at the meeting with the municipalities, ranging from it would be somebody who would be 5 hours a week, an hour a day, up to the 30. And part of that, I Sorry, John?
When you say meeting with the municipalities, this was the CAOs, not the councils themselves, right?
Correct, the
Okay.
CAOs and treasurers, just to go through the draft so that they would have, we would sensitize them as to what the board would be looking towards coming out to present to their councils through them. But it would be prudent to have a conversation with them first. I think part of that may fall to how it was presented, and if I could have a rollback, I would have attached a draft job description that Carolyn had presented to us from the town of Lanark, or Lanark County, because their job description really went into what the position entails, duties, activities, skill sets, and that reinforces, we're not looking somebody to come in and just take the minutes and then print them up and send them out to us. We're looking for somebody who will handle the daily correspondence that, not the daily, but the correspondence that comes in from the zone, from the OASPC, SB, the police board, from the Ministry of Public Safety, as well as in from other boards and the insurance and all the administration. So there's going to be a certain task of managing the office. There is going to also be the reporting and managing of our budget. And that's a skill set we want to make sure we land on with someone credible who will provide to this board a monthly update on where we're at in terms of the budget and expenses and revenues, and then a quarterly report to the municipalities, and then our annual report up. So they'll be tracking all of the finances. They will also be providing guidance to the board and staying abreast and read of initiatives, policies, information coming out of the province and other boards that would be of interest to this board. So executive director is too strong of a title. Secretary, I don't think captures that experience, and that's really what they looked at, is it was somebody to sit down, do the minutes, and report back. Scott?
I kind of, whenever they had the meeting, I sat in the background and just took notes about what both sides were saying. And it seemed like there was a few CEOs that were pushing to the 5 hours. But Rob tried to explain to them, they can't even answer the emails that come in a run of a week on 5 hours. And there just seemed to be a couple of them that were pushing. And there was a couple that, like he said, if he would have had to go back, he would have done a job description. They just weren't sure what it entailed. And then there was one or two that just kind of wanted to make it what they thought would be what we wanted to do. And I do think that, Rob's on the right track here with the 20 hours per week. Some weeks they might work 15, some weeks they might work 30. All in all, it's going to average out to, around the 20 hours plus or minus. So at the end of the month, and we'll be able to go back and look at this, I guess the biggest thing is we really don't know what all this is going to entail and what the province is going to dump on us. We still don't know this yet. So I myself, looking at everything and summarizing what everybody had to say at the CAO level, I think the 20 hours per week is pretty close.
Thank you. I also, in the job description that Carolyn provided from, is it Lanark or?
Through your chair, yes. It was a draft administrative job posting that they had for Lanark County for their detachment board. They've had a similar position in the past. This is something that they were looking at for this new board and the requirements. They have over 30 members, so there's a kind of a significant administrative responsibility for that. But to note at this time, that has not moved forward. That whole detachment board is reevaluating their membership.
Okay, perfect, thank you. They were budgeting at 30 hours, $30 an hour and 20 hours a week. The thinking is we don't, as Scott said, we don't know what we're heading into, and this last 6 months has been full of surprises. I think going forward in our first year, it is better to go with a bit of a buffer, because if we undershoot this and we end up at June and finding we don't have the capability to manage, we won't have a receptive audience to go back midway through a budget cycle asking for more money. I would rather see us at the end of the year readjust next year's budget, the 26-year budget, having had a year of experience. And if there is money left over, we have two options. It can either A, be applied to the 26, or we can ask permission of the municipalities to create a separate account and put it in it as a reserve fund for the board. John?
Yeah, I mean, I look at this budget and go, there's so many unknowns in here, right? Whether it's the website and how much people are going to need it, the role of this, and I'm going to use the term corporate secretary, and I'll touch back on that in a minute. But I think for me, that message has to go to all the municipalities saying, we actually don't know. Right, we've got a fairly good handle on, it's not this size bucket, it's not this size bucket. We think it's about this size bucket, and we're going to get as close as we can to that, but it will be an iterative process, and we will be more accurate in 2026. And I think for me, that's part of it. And I like the point about saying, and if we're over, we may be able to save money the following year because, we didn't spend it all, blah, blah, blah. Therefore, the municipalities will work out okay. And then I go back to the position, on any board, certainly big and public boards, all that stuff, there's a person called a corporate secretary. And they are not an administrator, right? They're not a take notes. They're the board's guide and advisor, right? In many ways, they help write the policy, right? They keep the chair not honest, but on time, on track, right? That's kind of their thing, right? That's the guide. They're a guide to all the board members as well in terms of policy, timings, show up, all that sort of stuff. And they can make or break a board. So I would almost look at it, it's more that level of person, corporate secretary, and we're asking for, whatever, how many hours a week, right? This is not a junior, 23-year-old Algonquin grad who's just done his or her course. This is somebody who's a little bit more longer in the tooth, a little bit more experience, doesn't want a full-time job, but there's actually quite a lot of weight that comes to it and a lot of responsibility. So I'd look at it more as sort of corporate secretary role rather than just junior admin role. And I think if we can get those messages across, I think that will help in terms of understanding what the role is for.
The Hawkesbury board has hired their corporate secretary. I'm not sure what they call that individual, but they're paying $60 an hour. And they're going down to, they think, 20 hours a month because they've built all of the process. They have all their policies written. They have everything in place. And they're only meeting 4 meetings a month. So they're significantly, pardon? 4 meetings a year, 4 meetings a year. But their individual is somebody, it's the mayor who chairs the board, and this individual has worked with the mayor for years, is now retired, and they brought that individual in because they don't require training, they step in. But this is somebody who has significant experience, you're right, not a junior clerk. I don't think we're looking at somebody at that level, but there are people who are retired that may be interested in coming back to work for a few hours. Or, yeah. But I think, to John's point, the message is to get the message through that this is not a out-of-school individual. So the job description for Lanark was post-secondary, 5 years experience, municipal experience, understanding governance, understanding board, somebody with skill sets that can start the ground running. And as we said, we'd have the discussion at the midpoint review as to budget to actual, and that would also help inform the discussions as we start to set the 26 budget. And the other part of that conversation is if we are in a surplus, we have options to discuss. But this gives us the wiggle room that if we find it's more cumbersome, and I think in the first year of rolling this out, from what we've seen to date, we can expect a cumbersome year. It's better to come in well prepared. Thoughts? We ready to go to a vote? Oh, sorry, one other thing, the Mercs. Because this would be a position that is an employed position, we would open up an account with Revenue Canada, an employee account where we would be deducting at source and filing T4s and T1s at the end of each year. Jason?
Just a question with the administrator. So we basically, it's 30 hours, or $30 an hour, 20 hours, but do we now have to add employer costs and that to that?
That's the line below the 9,360.
Oh, yeah.
So the 30 would be the actual salary, but on top of that, we would be paying mandatory employment costs.
Oh, yeah, I see what you're saying, underneath that, okay. Sorry, yeah, thanks.
That would include their costs plus ours, because we would have a responsibility to pay the employer's share of EI and CPP. Are we okay to move to a vote on it? So if we could get someone to move the program expenditures, Scott, seconder, John, sorry, all in favor? Carried, thank you. And then the last was just a 10% miscellaneous, and that allows us, again, for the unknowns in the first year. Again, the narrative to that would be if we find we do not need it in this year, and if we end up with a reserve, it would pull that requirement for miscellaneous out, that in 2026 budget, if we find we needed money, we could dip into whatever reserves we realize from this budget. So if we could get a mover on it. Jason? Okay,
So Jason,
yeah. Jason, Steve. And vote to carry. All carried, perfect, thank you. So that brings the budget in with approval. The two things that came up recently, sorry, Connie?
Does this have to go back to the municipalities?
Yes.
Okay.
This is now, it's no longer a draft budget of the police board, this is the police board's budget. The two things which are not in here is, and again, as we get into this, we'll keep an eye on it for '25, but there's no provision for board training, and most of us are reeling coming out of the 6 hours we've just spent. We'll have to keep an eye on it because it's something we have the miscellaneous, or if we get midpoint and we see we have some relief in certain areas, we may look at training, and also community outreach, which once we start developing our priorities that we will share with OPP, community outreach may be part of that. So stuff for thought as we go through the year, but we have some flexibility in some of those elements, and not a lot. Community outreach would be like $1,000 if we want to, have the police board represented at Remembrance Day or something of that sort. But options for discussions once we get running into next year. All right, so our budget is done.
you might want to approve on the full budget then.
Big pardon?
Do you want to approve on the full budget?
Yes.
Would that change? So it's one. I made that change to the honorariums.
Okay, so the total budget with a change to the honorariums. Sorry, what was the honorarium?
What's the honorarium? You reduced it to,
Sorry, through you, Chair. Was there not a reduction from 10 members, or 11 members to 10? Because the chair
What
was
was-
extracted out as its own honorarium.
no,
No?
because it's 9 of us and 2 provincial.
Yeah, it's 11 next
Right.
year.
Never mind.
So it's not, it's, as-
No, it should be the
Yeah, that's going from 11 to 10, you're correct.
Yeah, okay, wait.
Because you're separate.
correct.
Sorry.
Oh,
There's
that's right.
7 members, 2 community, that's 9, 2,
Take me out.
yes.
Oh, you're nuts.
Oh, you don't want us to put that to the vote.
So what was the total, sorry?
So the total now is 115,226.
So what's the total of the honorariums?
The honorariums would be,
Through you, Chair. So with the estimated 8 meetings at $150 for 10 members, comes to $12,000. The chair monthly honorarium would remain the same, because that's a monthly. And then the employer cost was the 14%. So that's $19,320.
Thank you.
Yeah, the only thing, you were to be at a certain level, then there's the 150, and then the vice. I don't want any more than 150, but we don't have an option whenever they're dictating us be paid at certain levels. I just don't want us to come in shy if I'm supposed to be paid at another, because I thought I was in between Rob and the 150, which would raise that another $300-400.
Do you want me to?
I don't want any more than the 150, like,
yeah, it's a position. Should we
it's
leave
just,
it?
I don't want us to come, be forced to pay at a certain level. That's me, but the next person stepping in might need that other monies, and who am I to dictate to them what they need or don't need?
So through you, Chair.
Yeah.
Are you, just for clarification, are you talking through legislation? At this
Yes.
point in time, there is only the minimum fee of 150. There's no increase or no specified increase for chair or vice chair or any other positions identified in legislation.
Oh, I thought there was, at our last meeting, they were talking 3 different levels.
They were talking about what boards are doing.
Oh, okay.
So
All right, all right.
it wasn't legislated.
All
And
right.
it's interesting, the Hawkesbury board
Yeah.
is significant, their wages are significantly higher.
Lanark's,
And, yeah. So I think we're coming in with, I think, is a really fair budget when we've done the homework to look at what other boards were getting paid. And I'm also really sensitive to what we're feeling around the table now in our respective councillor hats
Yeah.
with the recent receipt of the OPP. Because it's.
not you.
Yeah, yeah.
Well,
Yeah, well,
it came to us last night, it's 1.25.
We're significantly higher. John?
But I think, again, we're all stepping into this new. I like the 150 because there's a lot of unknowns here, and we're gone conservative. We didn't do what Hawkesbury did, right? But I think, again, it's one of the things every year, and it's like any employee, you do are we a P50 employee or a P75 employee? Where are we on the spectrum, right? We then look at the average across and decide where do we want to be. We certainly don't need to be P90, right? But nor do we want to be P15, right? Or do we? Right, and I think that's the conversation for me, is look at what the other boards are doing and find out where we're happy and make sure that, it fits with the culture that this board is setting out to say, no, we're comfortable being a very conservative, right, respectful to our communities board, right? I think for me, that's kind of where I want to see us evolve this is to make sure we're fitting into that sort of as opposed to Hawkesbury or when others just said, no, we're going to be this much. And I know there's a mandatory that we can't go below, but again, just looking at what the other boards are doing and why and timing and make sure it fits with what we're doing. We don't have to be them, we just have to be us, but make sure it fits in that.
So if we can come back to the full budget, and the motion would be that the board approve the 2025 budget as presented for a total amount of $115,226, $115,226. If we can get somebody to move that, Jason and John, all in favor? Carried. So moving this forward, we're going to clean it up with the amendments, and then write a narrative so that when it does go back to the 7 municipalities, there will be just that, I've copied your, we want to be conservative and respectful of our communities. This budget reflects the deliberations with a number of other boards of similar ilk. And then just run through each of the main items with, in some cases, just a one line, but give our policy rationale. And then we can attach, we'll remove the reference to land art, but we can attach their draft job description, which really resonates the skill set and the matrix that we're looking at for the individual or the incumbent of the position. And hopefully when that goes to the CAOs and then to their CFOs or COOs and then to their councils. And Carolyn, would we draft a motion that councils could use? Like we did, remember when we did the nominations, you developed something for the councils?
That was more of I drafted an appointment bylaw for each of the municipalities to adopt. In this case, we would put forward the budget with the motion from the board that we approve the budget, and then it goes forward to them.
Okay.
And then they proceed.
Thank you. Lisa?
Thank you. So along with that motion, included in that motion, will there be the division, the anticipated division amongst the 7? And okay.
Correct.
Thank you.
The division? I think you said division. The division, yes, that's the next part. So there was discussion at the meeting with the CAOs and finance. And the legislation is quite clear. The default position, it is a equally shared budget. But that there are options if the 7 municipalities can come to an alternative funding arrangement, that would stand. And then there's a number of caveats and options if they can't. But ultimately, it would fall to a shared. That's a discussion for the municipalities. It's not a decision of this board. This board is to present the budget. We can provide advice and recommendation, and we can provide the 2 formulas that it would be 16,000 if equally shared, and then by each municipality what the rate would be. But that's a discussion amongst them. It's not a discussion of the board. Up to municipalities to determine how they're going to cover the cost of it, which goes to the default if they can't come to consensus. Carolyn?
Through you, Chair. I would suggest that the board have a recommendation going forward with the budget. To your point, ultimately, if one of them is not in a favor of a proportionality, it will default to the legislation, but it might be beneficial for the board to have an opinion.
Okay. Jason?
Through you, Chair. And I would suggest putting a timeline on it so it's not kind of floating around forever, and they have to get back to us by a certain date if they want to choose another option. So thanks.
So to our recommendation, do we recommend equal share, or do we recommend it be population-based. Jason, and then Lisa.
And I'll start the conversation off. I would suggest shared amongst the municipalities. Everybody has a seat at the table, the same decision, so I think the cost should be spread out through the 7. That's my opinion anyway.
Okay. Lisa?
So I'll see your position, and I'll raise you the fact that I've spoken with our council, and they would not actually support any budget that was not considered, that was not equal across.
Sorry.
They would not support anything that was proportionate. It has to be
Okay.
shared equally in order for them to consider it.
Angela?
Coming from a significantly smaller municipality with a significantly smaller tax base, I would be in favor of population representation, simply because our tax base is minuscule compared to the other municipalities. I think we are either the smallest or the second smallest municipality in the province or something. So coming up with that 16 and change is going to be difficult for our township.
Scott? Okay.
Again, it doesn't, we're one of the townships that are, it doesn't matter which way we go. We're talking $500 either way, probably. So, you know, we're pretty, or I guess it'd be about $1,000 difference. So, but I do see Angela's point of view, and the only way that we could get around that is just to keep with the OPP billing and don't rethink the wheel. You know, like last night we got our operational side, and you know, X number per household operational side, and now we would fit under the administrative side. So do we stay with that? You know, that way there, it would be the fairest way for smaller municipalities. But again, looking at the board, there's only 7 of us with 7 equal votes. So I can see what Jason and Lisa are saying. I can see what Angela is saying. I would be more apt to, you know, stay with the OPP numbers. They already have the formula made up, and it would be cost per household. That would be the fairest way that I could see it happening.
Connie?
I've already had council members balking that we even have to pay for any of this, so I think we're going to have to go with cost per household or per population.
Okay. Jason, did you put your hand up?
No.
No, okay. Okay.
Rob?
Sorry, go ahead, John.
Again, what are the other police boards doing? Much as I got the legislation, there's got to be other police boards in the same, where there's big, municipalities, small municipalities. What are they doing? Are they following the OPP formula, or are they going equal, or is it just a mixed bag and boards all over the place?
Right now, it's a mixed bag, and we're at the front end of having these discussions. Some boards still don't have insurance and haven't come to this yet. So it's an area. Greater Madawaska is in the same as a lower tier or a smaller municipality. Our delta would be between 8,000. If it was shared, we'd pay 16. If it wasn't, we'd pay 8. But it is talking to our team, it's the ability to pay, it's not the amount. And smaller municipalities, 8,000 is an awful lot of money in a small municipality where we're already looking at a significant OPP increase. And then there is going to be the outfall of this with our respective ratepayers, because in our case, we're a 3.26 increase on our tax base before we do anything with the increase from the new OPP billing cycle. On top of that, we're going to see another 0.4% increase if we go shared. So that is coming close to a 3.8, 3.9% tax rate before we even open up the budget. So we could be looking at a double-digit tax rate. Speaking with Graham this morning within public safety, there are a number of councils that are starting to be, they're pushing back firm on the OPP, not on the police board budgets, but on the OPP billing. There's some interesting conversations going around where there's, the revolt's too strong of a word, but there's certainly pushback saying we need to reevaluate the level of policing that we want in our communities because we just can't afford it. We do not have the money, and we can't reduce existing services to our ratepayers in other areas. We just can't squeeze anymore. So I think yours is 500,000, is that right?
4 something, I think.
4 something? You're 4? So that's an awful lot of money to find out of a budget that are already being tight. We're 160, which we do not have.
Can I, just out of interest for the mechanics, I'm just trying to understand, so obviously the median 16.5 if it's shared across. What does proportional, and it helps me understand, what does proportional mean to you guys versus that? Like, what does it jump you up?
So I had crunched the numbers, I don't know if you have those handy, Rob, from the numbers of, in terms of proportional versus, like I know in your case it's 8,000 if it's not,
Rounded numbers.
if it's rounded versus, I think we're in even 16 or so each way if it's
Carolyn,
not,
do you
right?
still have the numbers?
Okay, great.
Through you, Chair. So I did look at, I mean, I can it'd take me a few minutes if I actually plugged in that budget and divided up. But if you look at the calls of service, the cost per property for each of the municipalities, I can run through those because I have those handy right now. So it kind of gives you a variety of what each. This is based on
For our budget.
This is based on the police budget. So I did have all municipalities, all 7 municipalities provide me with their 2024 billing, and we pulled the calls for service portion. So like Arnprior is looking at 0.48, McNab Braeside is 0.15, right? Horton is 0.07. Greater Madawaska is 0.10, Town of Renfrew is 0.54, Admiston Bromley is 0.06, and Whitewater is 0.18. So that just kind of, that's the proportionate, and then that's kind of applied to their cost per property, and then their total calls for service. So those would be kind of the percentages that we would apply if we were looking at the proportionate billing. Does that, through you, Chair, does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Would it be easier if we just did a one-page document, emailed it out with the cost per each municipality equal shared, and then a second column showing if it was population-based or through the OPP billing formula? Lisa? I mean, it's mute for you because you've got a red line, it sounds like.
I have an absolutely red line on it. Based on the fact that this is a governance board, police servicing is based on service levels and the services that we do receive. It's been clear since the beginning that we are, in fact, when we walk in that door, we don't even represent the municipalities that we that we come from. And that's where the lack of proportional, this is a new cost for us as well. Don't forget, the only ones around the table who previously paid for a board were Renfrew, and we are facing, okay, apologies, yes. And so we're also facing pressures. I recognize small municipalities feel them differently. We've got a $400,000 increase, and we have a hard line. I can tell you, if I take this to council, we have a majority who have said, no, it's a governance board. Should this be, I felt it out just so that I could be as prepared as possible when we do come here and have this discussion. And I will not get this past my council unless it is shared equally, which is what the legislation says we do need to do as well.
Okay. John, Steve, independent thought?
Yeah, I'm in favor of equal shared costs for the reasons that my colleagues have stated. This is a governance where everyone has an equal seat at the table, and this is not so much a fee-for-service cost, and so for that reason. And I
John?
would be interested to see the delta in terms of if it was OPP formula, what that means for the higher populations, jumping from 16 to what, and just...
Yeah, what was that? Because my math takes you to about 34K from 16. That's kind of where I'm roughly playing with the numbers that, there. And again, come back, that's just roughly playing here. I think, first of all, I'm annoyed the legislation, because then we've got two different funding models. We've got one that's, the OPP, and, everyone's kind of got used to, and then we've got this new one, which is, oh, and if you can't get it out, this is the default. It's like, well, thanks, Mum, thanks, Dad. Right? I don't, it doesn't seem to work for me. And I also get the, trying to find the balance of, governance board, but then to size of what's possible to pay, right? And again, if I was playing with the numbers, that takes you from about 8, instead of 8K to 16.5, right? So it's an 8.5K jump for the smaller municipalities, but it's a 16.5K jump for the bigger municipalities go the other way. So I'm torn right this. I think I don't have a definitive answer. I think I kind of went with the OPP funding model because it's one everybody's used to, and we've kind of just, then the board has the same model as the OPP, we're all the same, whereas now we've got a different funding model than the people we oversee. But I get the point of the governance piece because everyone gets an equal vote up here. So I think it's almost put all the senior leaders of the municipalities in a room together and come out with a decision, because I don't think we can come out with a recommendation. The municipalities could give a crap and do what they want to do. We default to the legislation. Even if just one municipality disagrees, we default to legislation. So there's no point if Arnprior is where it is, which is their right? We don't get a vote, right? We don't get a say in that. My mind is the mayors or this is where they need to decide this. Right, and if they, again, Arnprior says nope, well, we know what legislation says, right? But then you've got 4 or 5 municipalities going, thanks, Arnprior, right? Which is the reality, but they don't elect the council, so there is a reality of that too. So I see no black and white in this. The only thing I can think of is put all the municipal, all the community. Go back, because you're not here representing your municipalities, go back and represent your municipalities, or have your mayors or whatever it is get together and give us an answer. I don't know.
It's so it's our mandate to present the budget. It's their mandate to fund it, and the legislation calls for the default of shared. And then an alternative is to discuss an alternative funding arrangement. With my municipal hat, I'm in favor of shared, of population-based, but with my board hat, I recognize its governance. We are not here for the operational side of policing, which is clearly proportionate-based. We are here to provide the community access into policing, which will be new for OPP, because we will ultimately at one point be sending to the OPP what our community priorities are. for them to incorporate into their policing structure. And that's a very new shift. So that's governance at its highest level, shared amongst all of us. And we need at this table to have that equal vote in representing our respective areas as we get into the policy measures. And it's the first time OPP will be in a position, any police force will be in a position where they're taking oversight from a civilian body, thus the Community Policing Service Act. So there's some significant changes coming forward, and I think our role as governance is going to be equally shared across each of our municipalities. It's a hard call, but it's also our first year. So there's nothing to say we can't launch this first budget on default, because if we know you're not going to move, the next level is for this to go up to arbitration, which I don't think we want to see. And that's the provision of the Act. If municipalities can't agree, then it goes up through the Inspector General's office and they'll set the budget and the billing. I think that's a long way down the road. That's just a provision of the legislation. But we can present this, and I'm not sure we want to make a recommendation at the board, because it's not, I think we just have to clearly articulate what the legislation says, and for them to come back with their plan, give the two options, but not make a recommendation. Here are your two options, shared or not. They come back to us with a fixed time and we move forward, but the default for the first year out, this can be re-examined in year 2, in 26. We'll have a different budget, and maybe then we have a different funding formula when it's not catching us by surprise. But Connie?
I'm having a hard time with this, because if we aren't representing our municipalities,
No, we're
what are
not.
we doing here then? I don't understand. I mean, I mean, why did she talk to her council? Why did I ask my council members? If it has no bearing on us being a council, I don't understand. I mean, obviously, I understand what she's saying and what I was saying before, but I agree, it has to be shared now, because we each have one vote. It's not like the county level. So I don't understand why they've given us this option to have alternate funding, when we know if it's going to be defaulting, it's going to go right to shared. And all this discussion that we're having, to me, is empty. And I'm sorry I feel that way, but I don't get it now. I mean, it wasn't until just now that I understood why I'm not representing my municipality here.
Correct. That's the legislation. The legislation is a challenge to work through. We're going to, and again, back to early conversations of the budget, it's going to be a year of interpretational challenges, because the legislation, for the most part, was built for policing services, and that part of the act makes sense. It's just this whole governance piece with the board is new for the ministry, and it's fraught with implementation challenges like the one we're having now. But you are seeing that shift. I'm seeing the shift now, that our role here is not, we're not sitting here as councillors, we're sitting here as board members. We're sitting on a board that is not tied to the Municipal Act or to council at all. We report independently to the Inspector General within the Ministry of the Solicitor General directly. We don't report to OPP. We have a supremacy over the OPP in terms of our ability, our mandate to provide recommendation and policy. Recommendation, not direction.
I have a feeling I'm getting off topic here, but I mean, we've always had the ability to advise the OPP how to police our municipalities. What has changed that all of a sudden we have this magical power that we can tell our officers what they're going to do?
No, we cannot tell officers.
No, but we're going to tell the OPP who have to tell their officers.
We don't tell them what to do. We will set priorities, community priorities that we give to the OPP detachment, and they adjust their operations and are measured against the delivery of activities supporting the priorities of the board.
But I thought we always had that option through our community policing.
No.
Really?
And it's independent of municipalities.
But you just
But
said
where-
it's the
where we are-
municipalities who will be saying how we want our communities policed.
I'm,
I think I'm
Yeah.
way off topic here. This is too deep for
let's
this,
move-
so.
I'm looking at the
yeah.
topic just a second, just we have 15 minutes, and if we could park this, we're going to come back to it, but I'd like very quickly to talk about our 2004 budget for a moment, if we could, just because I want to get it in before a 3 o'clock closure. But we'll come back to this at the end. Beg your pardon?
3:30.
Oh, wait, going to 3:30? Oh, okay, good. Okay, then, sorry, we'll continue on. There.
Said, I think this is,
Yeah.
I think this is too deep for what we're discussing here. Because like I
Let's have-
said, it just came to me that
Yeah.
we're
Carol?
governance, not a counselor, even though you have counselor on our,
We shouldn't have council, we are not here as
that's what
elected
I'm,
officials.
that's what I'm looking at. I'm thinking we're
And if
not
we
here
can
as
change
officials, so
those,
it shouldn't.
Well, we'll be at the OPP board
Anyway,
next, so.
I digress. Let's, yeah, I think I need to investigate this a lot further than I have.
Sorry, I just turned off my mic. Through you, Chair, just, and not to dive into that part of it, but just to go back a little bit, just so the board's not hung up on the OPP billing model as an option, that's not specified anywhere in the legislation. The legislation clearly defines a shared division unless another model or consideration is made. So again, I think the OPP billing was just something that was put out there before based on kind of what we're, again, used to seeing as a municipality, but nowhere is that identified. So just so members aren't concerned that, you know, one says one thing, one says another, the legislation is kind of clear to say, this is what it is, unless you want to think of something else. So just clearing that up a little bit. Again, not an easy decision, but.
Jason?
Through you, Chair. So, yeah, I think we could go on here for weeks and weeks. I would put a motion or whatever on the table that we move forward with presenting this budget. Don't give them an option. The option is they have a date to get back to us. If they come up with a different plan for the cost of it, if not, then it's shared. And we just move forward with this, because this could go on forever, like.
But we want to move our budget forward in front of municipalities. We move the budget forward, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, we move this budget forward for $115,226. We do not give them an option. Don't say it can be shared, or if you come up, just say it's a shared cost, like it is in the act or whatever, unless the 7 municipalities can come up with an agreement by such and such a date. If we do not hear back by such and such a date, then it's this budget shared.
Okay, we should give them a date.
I think we should give them a date.
Such and such is a little vague. By our November meeting? In advance of our November meeting. So
In advance, a week of, or 7 days, so that you can have it on the agenda for our November. I'm sure everybody is going to meet at least once, if not twice, before.
When's our meeting in November?
Through you, Chair. That has not been defined yet. I do have an opinion on the matter.
Yeah.
I would like to have a consistent meeting going forward, I think, for scheduling purposes and everything else. So
Yes.
my recommendation would be either the 3rd or 4th Wednesday of the month, remaining at 10 a.m. However, that has not been discussed or decided by the board at this time.
How is the third week in November at 10 a.m.? No? Getting a
What
little
date
late.
did you say?
If we go through you, Chair, sorry, if we go with the 3rd Wednesday of the month, and I'm suggesting Wednesday because that has traditionally been the most favorable for all members.
So
And though
that's
I'm
the
getting a
20th.
shake of the head, it was November 20th. The 4th would be November 27th.
I'm good with the 20th.
I'm good with the 20th.
Our budget is passing on November 20th.
Beg pardon?
We're passing our budget, or we're doing the final revisions on the November 20th to pass our budget.
Wow.
Lisa?
So Wednesdays are actually incredibly difficult for me because they typically line up with City of Ottawa Council days.
Right.
Afternoons are better. I don't know how everybody feels about 1:30 meetings as opposed to the 10 a.m. meeting. It certainly makes Wednesdays a lot easier for me to swallow if that is an option, but I don't speak for the group, obviously. Whatever. It's just very difficult. I mean, it means I'll miss meetings is all, which.
Through
So
you,
you're
Chair.
proposing the 4th Wednesday then?
27th,
Is there any chance that we can do oh, sorry.
I'd say, well, do we need to get ahead of this budget, Whitewater's budget?
Could I make
Yeah,
a,
Yes.
19.
Let Carolyn make a suggestion.
could I make an opinion? So if the board is approving the budget tonight, the proposed 2025 budget tonight, and this goes forward to councils, basically after this meeting, all councils will have that information in front of them, which would lend to passing of the budget. It would be the matter of how the billing is to be divided. So that would be the decision that would come back, whether you call a special meeting or by default, as soon as we get word back then from one municipality that it continue forward as a shared.
I'm so confused. So help me to wrap my head around this. And you had a motion, and I'm still confused. So these budgets are going, we are going to present them, they're coming before our councils. Check?
Check.
Okay. At what point in time is the decision, and who is making the decision on the cost sharing of the budget?
So when it's presented to the budget, there will be a package.
To the council?
Or to the council, sorry. When it's presented to council, coming from the board to the 7 councils, there will be a package. The budget, a description of what's inside the budget and how we landed on those numbers, and the legislation as it applies to the funding of the budget. So we will pull from the Act the paragraphs that talk about shared, or if the 7 municipalities can come to a mutual agreement on alternative funding.
So this is where I'm confused, because if it's coming to our independent councils, how are we coming to a group decision?
We
Amongst
have
the
no
7.
decision at our table. We will take that of which the 7 municipalities come to us with.
Okay, but if it's going to 7, I'm so sorry, if it's going to seven of us, okay, 7 different councils being discussed independently at 7 different councils, and 2 or 3 of those councils want the cost, the proportionate representation costing, and the other ones want to have the shared based on the legislation, that's what comes back to us here. We're no further ahead than we are with these discussions.
The legislation talks about it going to default. It's default that it is shared unless the 7 can come up with an alternative. If one of the 7 wants to stand firm on it, they can put forward a recommendation for mediation, but the default is really to split it with the 7. If we can't land on something, then it goes to the IG from the board. The board then goes back to the IG just saying, we could not get consensus from the 7 municipalities.
And we don't want that to happen.
No.
So that being said, would it not make sense for us to have a recommendation that comes out of this board? Because otherwise we are going to end up without consensus, I'm sure. So I'm willing to continue to talk it out. We can discuss it at the next meeting.
Angela?
Related and not related, my council meets tomorrow night and does not meet again until November 7th. So my council will not see this budget until November 7th. That's 3 weeks away. That's a good chunk of the time that, yeah. So I think we should be giving a time, but I don't, as much as I'd love it to be, that third week of November, I don't think it's feasible. I just don't.
Steve?
And not to put words in your mouth, Lisa, but I think it's a very pragmatic kind of process question, because I just assumed that everyone was collaborating together and didn't fully appreciate that's all independent, and yet it needs to be a consensus. So I think
It's new.
that
new
poses a
territory for us
challenge
all.
in terms of differing opinions, because there's a couple decisions to be made.
Do you want some procedural help?
Jason and then Carolyn.
Through you, Chair. Then we could put it to vote tonight and put it as shared, and then we put the budget through to the municipalities with our option, whether it's shared, however the vote goes tonight, shared or by the OPP billing. So them two things together will go to each municipality after today, and then they can take it to their next meetings. Because and it's nobody's fault, but we're kind of behind the 8 ball now, because budgets are, like Connie said, and they're like,
We're in ours as well.
yeah. So anyway, that would be my suggestion, but
Angela?
I think I'm leaning towards what you had said, don't give them options, just give them the budget. I know how certain councils are, I know how certain councils are going to vote, so then it's going to be to the CAOs to hash out, I think, is how it's going to come down. So I think we just pass the budget and leave it at that.
We present the budget,
Yep.
and we present the appropriate part of the legislation.
We have no opinion.
And we attach a one-pager showing, or do we even show, the split contribution and the proportionate?
If they want to know, they'll figure it out.
That's right. And there are other options that we're not thinking about. It doesn't talk about, you're right, the OPP budget. It talks about other funding options that are mutually agreed between the 7. So it's a strange piece of legislation. We're in a horrible spot. So would that make sense to you, Jason, that we don't present a recommendation, we just present the budget and the legislation?
yeah, so I'll change my motion.
Okay, Carolyn had her hand on the,
Again.
Carolyn had her hand on the button, so let's have.
Yeah.
Through you, Chair, I was going to try to assist procedurally wise with how to move forward, but if the board's wishes to not provide recommendation, I think your motion, Jason, if I'm correct, could simply read that the Renfrew Area OPP Detachment Board recommend that the joint municipal councils approve the proposed 2025 budget of $115,226 as presented, or as provided.
Perfect, thanks.
Perfect.
Carolyn, don't roll your...
Okay, thank you.
Connie, did you have a question? I saw your,
Thank you.
You said we are going to send them the information as to how it gets paid, because, yeah, right? We're not with a recommendation, we're just saying this is a
we'll
legislation.
give them the legislation.
Okay,
So the budget, what's going forward will be the budget, the narrative behind the budget, and the legislation.
but if we don't give them the, how it has to be paid, they'll have to come up with an idea of how to pay it anyway.
And a timeline for payment,
Yes.
or a decision. Lisa?
I don't know that we can actually pass this without knowing what the proportionate cost is.
Yep.
I don't think we can, as a council can't pass it without knowing how, what
Okay.
does it mean to Arnprior? What does it mean to Renfrew? What does it,
But their counselors, the people around the table may not understand the complexity, so maybe that is, the legislation as default is shared, and we give that number. And then the next paragraph would be the legislation provides for a mutual agreement by consensus on alternative fundings, which would be shared. But that the default, because you're right, we need to let each municipality know what the cost is.
right, because Arnprior, McNab, we're not approving $115,000. We're approving, right, and we're budgeting for our portion of this. And without having a solid understanding of what our portion is and what we're agreeing to, this can't be approved.
You're not approving this as a council member, though.
I am when it's at the council table,
Yeah, at the council table.
which is where this is coming.
But I didn't think it came to the council table. I thought it was the CAOs and the treasurers.
Each council will have to approve the OPP budget.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's,
Carolyn's going to,
Quickly through you, Chair. So basically, you're taking $16,460 to be approved, shared, because that's how it is, unless the 7 municipalities agreed, which it sounds like they're probably not going, it's not going to happen. It's kind of like winning 649, like I don't think it's going to. So basically, you're going $16,460 is what each council would be approving.
Sorry, what is it?
16,461. Yeah. 16,461, yeah.
yeah, go ahead.
Just again, to aid the board on some procedural, if I put my town clerk hat back on, during a council meeting, when the budget is provided and presented, a member of council or representative of this board could put a motion on the floor to direct staff to negotiate or to have further discussions with each of the 7 municipalities, and that would be at the time where potentially treasurers or CROs are directed at that time to explore other options. But again, putting the budget forward with the legislation where it clearly says shared, unless otherwise agreed upon, that kind of gives that that background. Council would have to direct this.
No, but I mean the CEOs don't live in once a week or once a month anyways?
Not at, sorry, to your question, that the CEOs meet once a week or once a month. There is a group across Renfrew County that meets, but it's not specific to these 7 municipalities. So I would say that if a member of this board, at the time that the budget is presented to their council, move to have further discussion, that could be an option at that time. Again, going back to a procedural end, outside of this board, that is an option at this point if the board wishes to move forward with the proposed budget, which was the motion on the floor, with a copy of the legislation and the narrative, then that would be the board's position.
Angela and then Lisa.
Based on the information that it sounds like we're going to give them, I think that the CAOs may email, Zoom, meet quickly, or as quickly as they can. But again, our council won't even see this until November 7th. So our CAO can't act on anything until November 7th. I think it's just going to end up going to default unless the smaller municipalities really get upset and take it to arbitration, which is possible. I don't see our township doing it. I don't see our township being happy. But if the legislation says shared and nobody else is going to be coming up with the other solution, then it's going to end up being shared. But yeah, it's going to end up being shared, but there's going to be a lot of arguments about it in the meantime, I think.
Lisa?
I know.
Oh, okay.
Through you, Chair. To move this along, we do have a motion on the floor that the Renfrew Area OPP Detachment Board recommend that the joint municipal councils approve the proposed 2025 budget of $115,226. If it is the board's wish, we could have a mover and seconder on that.
Angela?
I can't move or second. However, we did talk about putting a date
Yes.
in there. What is the, because we had our
Well, I think-
discussions about the date as well.
I think there's that, we have the motion. I think the narrative would have the date in it, along with the comments that you just made, which I think are very helpful around the legislation and the options that lined into what you were driving at. So the date could be in the narrative that goes out with this package, which would hit the CAO's desk first in preparation of council. That may give a trigger to the CAO to start discussions in advance of council to land on a position by the time it gets to council. So I think the date would be, realistically, I think to get the budget back approved and a funding model would probably be end of November, which would give all of us an opportunity to have it presented in our November board meeting. Does that make sense, Carolyn? Procedurally? Yeah, okay. So the motion could go as read, and then the narrative, we will address that. Are we all right? Any more questions, comments, discussions? Could I have someone to move? Oh, one more comment?
Sorry, just one more comment, and just to clarify, like the CEOs and the treasurers in all 7 municipalities do know that there is options there, like, because Rob had a call with all of them, so it's not going to be a surprise when we say it's going to be shared if you can't come up with a plan, because they all are well aware of this, like a month ago, probably 3 weeks ago, so just to clarify.
All right, motion's on the table. Do we need it reread, or are we good? Motion to move, Scott, and the seconder is Connie. All in favor? Perfect, thank you. Carried. All right, if I could move us over to the 24 budget, which is on your table. And this is a very quick run-through. This is the budget. If you may recall, we talked about the opportunity. We're still spending money during the year '24. And Renfrew has been covering the costs of this to date. So Carolyn's time has been provided to us, which has been very helpful. We wanted to have something in place as a budget in the event that the ministry comes down at the end of the year offering funding to boards for their implementation costs, because they're realizing there's a lot of activity that they didn't realize we were going to have to go through to get this up and running without funding. Do you have a copy of it?
No, I don't.
Oh, okay. Scott, can you run that down just to... Sure can. Lisa, do you need a copy? It might take me a minute, but I'm good. Pardon? Oh, thanks.
I'm so sorry, Rob. Oh, yeah. I forget you do that. This is my last bottle. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So it's fairly simple, and we don't need to get into the vote on this because it's our operating budget for this year. And it basically just set out and laid out the parameters coming forward. Under governance and operational, we had insurance at $4,000. The insurance has been paid, so we are currently insured. All of this has been done through the town of Renfrew, and at the end of the year, through an agreement that's already in place with the municipalities, whatever Renfrew is spending on the police services board will be cost shared equally amongst all of the 7 municipalities. So that was an agreement that was done when the legislation was put in place between the CAOs. So Renfrew has picked up that cost. We have the website design and hosting, and professional services, which really won't be, we marked them in, but I don't think we're going to be using those monies between now and December, but they're still in the budget in the event we do. This is really as a place marker so that when the ministry, and if the ministry comes back saying, we'll reimburse your costs from April 1st till now, we'll have something as a track to show to the ministry what our budget versus and our actuals were for reimbursement. IT supply, and then we have contract administrator for 12 weeks at the end. And now that we have insurance, we need to move fairly quickly to put in place all of our procedures and bylaws and governance documents that give us the tools we're going to need going into the new year. And we've been discussing that since June, but we wanted to wait until the point we had insurance. And one option is for us to have a contract with an individual who would write all of these policies for us. And the other, there's another option that may be more appropriate for us to get this work done between now and the year end. But we certainly need, you know, we only have 2 limited policy documents now. We need a plethora of governance documents that are effective, that will kind of give us, if we're starting with a bang in January, we want to be able to come out with our website saying, here is all of the policies and procedures that govern how we operate as a board. So Jason had one suggestion that, if I can give the floor to you to.
Through you, Chair. Yeah, one of the options would be that we use the town's clerk, so Carolyn, 5 hours a week, where she'd have to be, so the town would bill the municipalities for 5 hours a week, and she could start on, there's a bit of back work we have to kind of confirm, but with HR and stuff like that, but where she could start on working on the policies and procedures now, because that's kind of a holdup for us. We need to get them in place before we move forward with too much other stuff, so that would be an option we could look at. Yeah, I don't know if there's any questions on that. Or.
And the thinking was, you know, Carolyn has been holding this fort down remarkably well, wearing 2 hats, which are often challenging. But it's hard if she's being paid by the township and still working on our stuff. There's a natural tendency to have a little guilt that, you know, my home base, my pay is coming from that office, but I'm spending work here. So if she's on a 35-hour work week and we could buy an additional 5 hours of her time so she could sit comfortably knowing I'm being paid now by the board to do this function for these 5 hours, I don't have that shift to the municipality. And we would calculate from the town what that rate is. It would be just come part of the budget going our expenses towards the end of the year, which would be cost shared with the municipalities, but also possibly recoverable if there are fundings coming forward. I did reach out to Hawkesbury. They're doing the same they've done the same process. And I quietly asked if they would consider sharing the documents with us, and they said, no, but we'll sell them to you. So we may be able to sell the documents around us. But the skill set, I mean, it's what Carolyn has done in the town of Renfrew, is write policies and structures. We've got this golden opportunity. If she's willing to take on the 5 hours, it could be a win-win for both of us. I think with more of a win on our side, because we'll get somebody who knows the field, knows municipality, knows the governance within the council setting, but also has a really good understanding of the legislation. Could build off of existing models that she can find. And I think it's between now and the end of the year, at 5 hours a week would serve us really well. And then to make her life even easier, perhaps we could have one point on the board that she could liaise back to us, that, you know, I'm thinking of someone with governance experience that could be the point. And I had talked to John earlier to see if there was an opportunity of interest. because there's only two people. I'd be very generous with Steve right now because we have other plans. But it would be helpful to have somebody in the board that Carolyn can go to and have as her working colleague or point of contact, if that makes sense to you, Carolyn? And then John, to work with, and John can, with his background in governance, also oversee and provide to us through her the material. So going forward, it spreads the work around the board a little. There'll be a number of files to get us all active and engaged. Thoughts? Steve?
Would the expectation hope be that John's work is volunteer-based, or?
Yes.
Okay.
Because it's not coming to meetings, it's really just to have a point of contact. It's because Carolyn will draft through John and use John as a sounding board, and then they'll come and the real work will be at the council table to approve. And
My other question is this the 5 hours a week in addition to Carolyn's full-time hours?
yes,
Okay, and so when we're talking about background HR stuff, we're getting into overtime implications and costs? Or is this?
Through you, Chair. So yeah, just to confirm, we'd have to have a conversation with the our HR person here and stuff to see how that would work, but currently the hours are set at 35, so there is we've did this contract before, like we looked at before with another situation, so it's not new to the town, and we'd have to make sure Carolyn is on an agreement and stuff like that. Surprise! Just right now, like she's, because she's committing time to the police service, the Renfrew and Area Police Detachment Board, but it's in the town, and it's been fine up until now, but at some point we need to if she's going into doing, policies and procedures and all that, like it's a residence of the town of Renfrew that's been paying all the services up till this date, which is fine, but I think going forward we need to have a a plan in place to charge some of them hours out, so. Anyway, and if another municipality has somebody on staff that wants to do it too, then that's an option too, so.
I'm not sure there's other municipalities that would have the skill set in terms of the knowledge of the legislation and the act and the familiarity with the board.
We send people to her now, so.
Yeah.
Don't smile, we can just send it to our residents.
All right, so that we would need a motion for because we're expensing money. Do you want to put a motion together?
Sure.
Any other discussions or comments or thoughts on it?
Yeah. I think you mentioned that we have this 24 as on paper, and in the event, if the ministry comes to us at year end, we have something. If the ministry doesn't, what does this mean?
So there's already an agreement in place from the 7 municipalities that Renfrew will cover the costs up until December 24th, at which point the 25 budget will kick in. At December 31st, the town of Renfrew will tally up all of their expenses relating directly to the police board, and they will send a note to the other 6 municipalities saying, here's your share to refund to us towards the operation of the board.
Including everything, honorariums?
Everything that we've spent, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And the honorariums will be we'll go back and have, there's an audit process, the meetings, with the date of the meeting, who was in attendance. Some of the other stuff has already been covered, like the cost of going to the Zone 2 and the OSB meetings. All of those would be shared equally at the end of the year. So basically, they're running a line of credit for us until such time as we get to December 31st, and then they'll be reimbursed. Yeah. Oh,
So
do you want Carolyn to do it?
I think she's typed it up.
You two have worked together for so long.
Through you, Chair, just making sure I've established, so that the Renfrew and Area OPP Detachment Board establish a service agreement with the town of Renfrew for 5 hours a week of dedicated administrative support.
Correct.
Is that?
That's my motion, yes. Couldn't have said it any better.
Well done. Someone a
So
second? I'll second. Scott a second. All in approval? Perfect. Carried. Thank you.
It's hard to write about yourself like
Goody.
All right. Going back into the agenda, which I think I have lost. Here we go. No, we got it.
Sorry, just quickly through you, Chair. So in addition to that motion that we just put on the floor too, does the board wish to adopt that 2025 budget?
Yes.
So we need a separate motion for that, which would just be that the Renfrew and Area OPP Detachment Board adopt the 2024 budget as presented.
Connie? And John? Everybody in favor? Carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Carolyn. All right, Chair's report, item 7, just on the insurance update, that this is a carryover from the last meeting, but the insurance has been signed, paid, and we are covered. And we went through the association, Ontario Association of Police Services Boards. So it's a comprehensive package. It's what most people are going for, and it is in place. We do need to do a policies and procedures as part of the insurance, which we'll action right away. Banking update, we have the option, we're going to pause this for future discussion, but we'll eventually need, as this budget comes out, a banking account, and we have a variety of options that we'll come back to the board with at a next meeting. One option is through Bank of Nova Scotia, the other is partnering with Municipality to run a separate account through them. So we'll come back with pros and cons on both models, but we will need to eventually end up with a banking account. And with that, the policies and procedures around finance and signing and authorities and all the governance that goes with the bank. We can move past, we can park the closed section for this meeting until next. And then correspondence, this is a long list of correspondence that had been received. And then last, notice of upcoming business. There is it's a ways out, but in November is the Zone 2 meeting in Ottawa. There'll be more information on it to follow. And, yep.
Just under notice of upcoming business, and I'm not a believer of throwing things on the agenda, but just as we move forward with meetings and part of the governance end of that, now that we have insurance in place, these meetings will be live broadcasted. We will be trying to meet more at the OPP office. They have established kind of the meeting requirements to be able to do that for us. I have set up a YouTube channel for the board, as well as kind of the necessary background stuff that needs to take place for that. But just so everybody is mentally prepared for the fact that our next meeting will likely be live broadcast and then stored. And then eventually, right now with the website, we use a page off of the Town of Renfrew's website, but then eventually moving on to a board-specific website. But
Correct. Round table, anything else before we set our next meeting? And the next meeting was set for? It wasn't? End of November probably works best if we're going to give councils to the end of the month. How did that fourth week?
so through you, Chair. So I may have had Wednesdays wrong then. Was it My understanding was Wednesdays, but is it then, was it Thursday mornings that, because I think our meetings got a little jumbled, so maybe I missed, but I was trying to work around different council meetings and committee meetings. At one time, we were rocking pretty well on a certain date and
I
time.
thought it was Wednesdays.
No, definitely not Tuesdays.
Tuesdays are out for me.
Does,
I have a position for it.
does Thursday mornings, does that interfere with anybody's council meetings, standing committee meetings?
I've got meetings Thursday afternoons, standing meetings.
Thursday mornings?
Thursday afternoons,
Would Thursday,
12:30, as long as we go by 9:30, 10 o'clock, the latest. Do I get some free passes?
On Thursday, the 28th, I do have 12:30 to 3:30 at minute meeting. Just a one-off thing.
I'm good at 10 o'clock on Thursday.
if we do look at Thursday and we go with the third week of November, that would be November 21st at 10 a.m. And then the third week in December would be the 19th.
What time?
If we sat with 10 a.m. That would be the 21st and the 19th of December. And then we could look at the meeting schedule to carry forward into 2025. Eventually reducing meetings to 8 meetings a year.
So are we gonna have another one in October?
No, I think we're good, because if we get this material out, it'll go to the councils, and we come back on November 21st, and we should have feedback from councils by then.
So would these meetings be OPP or
OPP is the intent, but it's giving Carolyn the capacity to get it up and running.
Oh, so she'll just let us know where.
Yeah.
My intent will be the OPP Detachment office. I do have to check with with the officers to make sure that the rooms are available at that time. I do know that Mark is desirable for a set schedule so that they can book meeting space and plan accordingly.
And I think going into the new year, absolutely, we'll be able to make it.
And on those guys, if they have standing meetings
Yeah.
on Thursday mornings.
No, our Tuesday mornings, Thursday mornings should be fairly clear for us, but I'll double check with Mark when I see him.
Okay. Perfect. Date of the next meeting is set. And a motion to adjourn. Scott, seconder. Jason, all in favor? No, we don't need that. Don't need that, thank you. Thank you all for coming. Thank you for navigating through the training and allowing us to vote and move this forward. It's been an experience.